Welcome to Left of the Dial, where we'll be reviewing deep cuts and buried treasures from the classic age of vinyl and beyond. Thanks for joining me on the first classic song review. Today we are going to the year 1981 to look at the song Working in the Coal Mine by the band DEVO. For a group whose name is shorthand for de-evolution, I suppose it's only logical for this band to retreat backwards all the way to the year 1966 for this tune. DEVO had always been a band of surprises before, but this was a unique career move that not even the band themselves could have accurately predicted. You see, right around the year 1980, they had been contacted in hopes that they could provide a song for the adult animated film Heavy Metal and its tie-in soundtrack. In short, Heavy Metal is a gratuitously off-the-wall, may I say lovingly asinine movie that aims to send its highest praise to all things heavy metal and hard rock. Featuring the music of Sammy Hagar, Blue Oyster Cult, Nazareth, Grand Funk Railroad, and more. But it's a very narrow definition of heavy metal that made sense in 1981 but would be practically unrecognizable by 1984. Heavy metal music was getting a serious growth spurt at the time, but obviously still had distance to travel. A lot of its sound at the time was still carrying over the basic instrumentation and feel of 70s arena rock, resembling bands like Foghat or Bad Company a little too close for comfort. Oh wow, he's actually playing with chains on his guitar. Alright, dude. What even is this music video? As for the heavy metal film, it's definitely become a midnight screening / cult classic kind of movie. It premiered at just the right time to attract a passionate niche of film-going audiences, and not only brought in a respectable crowd for when it debuted, but its fans have stuck around and continue to regularly come back to it years later. Some people really remember this as a historic milestone for the heavy metal community, due to how it gathered together all metal fans of the time. It was a social touchstone in that regard. It's almost like what Easy Rider had done for the genre just a decade earlier. Actually, it did for metal fans what the movie The Wizard had done for NES fans at the back end of the same generation.
Super Mario Brothers 3!
If you're asking me if it's any good, well, your mileage may vary. People who say it's like the animated portions of The Wall if they made it into a full film are vastly overstating it. The story is non-existent, and it makes no secrets about its true intentions of subjecting you to all the cheapest thrills you could possibly want from a film called Heavy Metal. I imagine this is the exact kind of movie that Beavis and Butthead would watch for hours on end. It's complete nonsensical schlock, but why would you want it to be any other way? You're bound to like the look of this one if Dragon's Lair was your favorite arcade game. That's probably the best way to describe it. Or a really horny Zelda CDI game.
Great! I can't wait to bomb some Dodongos!
DEVO haphazardly threw something together for the film. They decided to send out a cover of an older blues tune from 1966 called Working in the Coal Mine. This song was made famous by Lee Dorsey, and it certainly has its standout differences from the eventual DEVO remake. Dorsey's version had more of a 16 tons feel to it, and there were some pretty unique instrumental quirks that the studio musicians dropped in there. Like, you can hear sounds of a pickaxe hitting on the backbeat, which was actually a pretty unique method of storytelling through music for the time. I wonder if this record's creators heard Johnny Cash play The Legend of John Henry's Hammer, or if McCartney heard this. Anyway, back to DEVO. The band has made several covers before, of course. Their sophomore LP, Duty Now for the Future, had the band covering Secret Agent Man, for instance.
Secret Agent Man! Secret Agent Man!
It's pretty alright, but DEVO covering Secret Agent Man is probably too obvious for my tastes. It's kinda like wearing a hat on a hat, or an energy dome on a bucket hat. I just prefer to see them add their much coveted brand of weirdness to the more unassuming places. The original already was pretty wacky, all things considered, even if they do come up with a pretty killer guitar riff for it. And let's not forget that they made one of the best cover songs ever. Their nervous, twitchy rendition of the Rolling Stones' I Can't Get No Satisfaction would get them routinely booed out of venues. Taking down a holy cow of rock reverence like the Stones, what with their herky-jerky, spasmodic rhythms, was what DEVO were all about as a band, commandeering an absolute deconstruction of rock and roll norms and showing the pitfalls of hero worship in popular music. See also Oingo Boingo's cover of You Really Got Me. For this one, nobody involved with the band seemed to expect all that much from the song's inclusion to the film's soundtrack, and it was considered a done deal, just a quickie between studio albums, which they were already underway in recording a follow-up to Freedom of Choice, which had spawned with it just 1 year earlier. With so many up-and-coming hard rock talents included on the heavy metal soundtrack, there were several contenders who were poised to score a potential crossover hit. It was almost an eventuality at this point, just a matter of who was going to be the breakout artist of this soundtrack. Oh no, it's DEVO. Imagine the shock of both the band and the record executives alike when this one-off cover began climbing up the charts and gained legitimate airplay. On an album that was marketed squarely at heavy metal fanatics, this was the only song from it that got any traction, and it came from DEVO. Putting it lightly, DEVO was the least likely band on there to gain any mileage from the heavy metal soundtrack, just behind Donald Fagen, probably. Except for those radio stations playing jazz and conversation from the foot of Mount Belzoni. But those guys probably weren't too big into Sammy Hagar. At least the soundtrack got to sucker a former Eagle into writing a song about heavy metal. That's pretty funny. It's like tricking David Crosby into rapping. I don't know what happened here. DEVO was an inherently anti-commercial concept since their arrival. Looky here, they had an actual hit on their hands. It's worth noting that Working in the Coal Mine wasn't actually used in the film itself. Okay, it was used in the end credits, but that doesn't really count. The soundtrack curators used their original song Through Being Cool instead, a song unreleased by the band at the time. The song was to soundtrack an outer space bar band set, essentially a new wave warped version of the Star Wars Cantina band scene. This was only one of 2 songs in the film not to be on the actual album. Both DEVO and Black Sabbath wanted to use their song contributions for their upcoming albums, New Traditionalists and Mob Rules, respectively. My biggest takeaway from this is that Dio Sabbath was still in operation at the same time as DEVO. Like, several albums in the can already, DEVO. I seriously can't wrap my brain around it. After the band chose to keep Through Being Cool for themselves, they remembered that they already had a fully recorded cover of Working in the Coal Mine, which was originally slated to be on the New Traditionalists album until Warner Brothers intervened. Not wanting it to go to waste, they optioned for their digitized 1960s blues cover to be used in a film about heavy metal wizards and alien magic lunkheads. When interviewed with Rolling Stone, bandleader Mark Mothersbaugh said, "We gave them Working in the Coal Mine, and the movie came out. And wouldn't you know it, with all these heavy metal bands, the one song that went onto the charts was DEVO's Working in the Coal Mine." So Warner Brothers panicked and they're like, "What are we doing? We don't have Working in the Coal Mine on the album." And they pressed a single and stuck it inside as a freebie in the first 100,000 or something. He finished the quote by stating, "We felt misunderstood the whole time we were at that label." If I can quickly address a common falsity in casual music conversation, DEVO are not a one-hit wonder. It's not something I can even get all that mad about because they're so obviously not. Here's VH1's Top 100 Greatest One-Hit Wonders of All Time countdown, where passionate music fans and industry insiders alike discuss DEVO and the Whip It music video, immediately alongside a featurette with the guy from Kaja Gugu. The fact that the band is near universally recognized today for their influence and groundbreaking sound is one thing, but this song right here is a case in point that they had amassed actual mainstream listeners besides just being the Whip It guys. It's equally wrong as calling Modest Mouse one-hit wonders because of Float On, which I have absolutely heard people call them before. So let's talk about the sound of Working in the Coal Mine. Ignore the title on the screen. That's a small typo I've seen people make for the song. It's Working in the Coal Mine, not just a coal mine. The music is bouncy and full of that sweet early 80s keyboard goodness. It bleeps and bloops in just the right way to bring a smile to any listener's face. Dual harmonies sing the entire song and take what could otherwise be seen as maybe an annoyingly insistent rhythm and instead turns it into a really delightful tune. It was a pretty crafty decision to program the drum machines into something that emulates a minecart going down the track. I wouldn't be surprised if the band came up with the sound effect first and tried to workshop an entire song around it. Also, an MTV favorite who's reworking a song decades removed from the 80s into a hit.
If you're blue and you don't know,
DEVO walked so that Putting on the Ritz by Taco could run. Albeit with less blackface in their music videos. That wasn't so super duper. The Tom's Diner Electronica remix would need to wait a little while longer, though. The music is jaunty and chipper, in spite of its subject matter being about the down in the dumps workaholics of the world. I don't think there's even so much as a hint of depression being expressed in the instrumental. This was made right around the time where everything DEVO touched started to sound more like the Crash Bandicoot soundtrack. The group kept the same twangy guitars from Dorsey's version, which was also a nice touch. The band implies that they are completely in on the joke, especially with those melodramatic vocal interstitials that keep popping up. This is probably one of the most happy-go-lucky songs I can think of, this side of Canary in a Coal Mine. A similarly titled song with the same super close harmony singing. Canary in a Coal Mine also has the added bonus of being the most annoyingly upbeat song you will ever hear in your entire life. These coal mining songs are dangerously speeding off the tracks, what gives? They make Coal Miner's Daughter sound like it was being sung on Quaaludes. Come on Loretta, chop chop! Speed it up lady, I don't got all day! Working in the Coal Mine is part of a series of new wave songs for the working man. Huey Lewis is working for a living, and so is Fonzie Thornton. It's arguable if working in the coal mine is all that much better than winding up working in a gas station, but it's clear that everybody's just working for the weekend anyhow. It is pretty comparable to working on the highway though, and the men at work probably listen to the working hour while they've got all their senses working overtime. The 80s was a time of big business and relatively small stresses. This crept into various facets of entertainment. Perhaps not coincidentally, Working in the Coal Mine was the first single the band released since Whip It's parent album came out. The first single off their follow-up performed less impressively than this one-off song did, despite Beautiful World being considered one of their best pop songs today. The success of Working in the Coal Mine was just another strange detour for this truly one-of-a-kind band. They seemed to take it in stride though, and the track continued to make appearances in their live sets for the remainder of the decade. DEVO's songs surely helped to move extra copies of the heavy metal soundtrack, which might have benefited them in the long run. I'd be curious to hear if anyone could make a convincing argument for DEVO having significant influence on the development of heavy metal. Many industrial metal acts seem indebted to the group, not least of which because they were among the first rock bands to use synthesizers as primary instruments. That wasn't seen much at all in 70s rock music. The band even repaid their favors by making yet another unusual cover. This time the song is Head Like a Hole, and no, I am not making this up. The band, of course, amassed a devoted fan base of oddballs, and they wouldn't prefer it any other way. Perhaps it was these brief brushes to the mainstream that led Mothersbaugh to jumpstart his soundtracking career, a line of work that he successfully pursues to this day. The band was working hard but never slipping. They might have been busy in the coal mines, but they were busy striking straight gold. And that's all I got for this episode. If you enjoyed what you saw, feel free to click like or hit subscribe to Left of the Dial if you want to see future content like this. And remember to keep your eyes to the stars and your ears to the radio. Good night, everybody.